Finally, we are here, the Dark Elf Formation Guide. I know the series is popular and I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's been largely requested. It wasn't something I wanted to rush through because this is one of the races I definitely take a lot of pride with, and we're going to show today how this more advanced race, on the battlefield at least, can function. So if you've not played the Dark Elves, I would play as the High Elves first because the High Elves are a defensive faction. They have a strong spear wall and can shoot over it with long range archers, allowing the enemy to come to them and react. And I always try to build in an element of defensiveness and reaction into these because that tends to be the easier ones to use. But today we're going to show how we can be offensive yet also have a reactive formation. A lot of this comes down to the key commands that you employ and the formation. So this is a more advanced race to use, but it is a lot of fun. We are going to go through every single legendary lord, but also show different formations that will apply across the different stages of your campaigns. Now, before we even start with the legendary lords, you are going to do many battles in this campaign, often just led by a single admiral, or even quicker is to build a barracks locally, and you do this by two means. One is through black arcs, which can discount the upkeep of anything that's inside them. They can also further discount it with the buildings. So first start off with the barracks, but don't be afraid to keep leveling up this main building if in doubt. Don't just level up buildings for the sake of it, level up your main building to further reduce that upkeep. After this, you'll absolutely want shades and then the beastie building so you can get hydras and even dragons, and gives you extra firepower within the reach of influence of the black arc. If we're moving further up to the north, we can quite simply move up, and now we can benefit anyone within that radius. This is an excellent army that can station just about anywhere and punch up quite well. First, choose your lord. Now, if this is an army, always choose a sorceress. I prefer fire and dark magic with the dark elves. Fire is a very easy one to use. Shadow is also very good. So we're going to go 1 and 2, our lord and hero. Now, next, get 6 dark shards and start them in box formations. We use boxes because when the unit has to rotate, the guys on the end have less to turn, and we want these guys to be firing. Never ever stop shooting. So with your formation, grab the 2 from the end, hold Alt, select your next 2 dark shards and place them at the front. And if you've seen my formation videos before, you know it, you love it. It is the 2 hollow diamonds. It is just effective. It means that one unit that engages with the front unit won't tie up 2 units. You want them to be close enough to support each other, but not touching so they don't interrupt each other. Let's call this number 3 and number 4. And our final 3 dark shards, let's put them down the back a little bit wider, 1, 2, and 3. And this is pretty much the same formation as the High Elf formation, and I'm doing this on purpose because I want to teach you how to play defensively with the Dark Elves, or as defensive as you can, because everything else you'll need to be more aggressive, and that does take a little bit more skill. Up the front center, most likely going to be infantry, which is why we have bleak swords doing better melee attack, meaning they will hit and beat other infantry a little bit better. On the front left, we just want line holding. Spears do better melee defense, as well as down the back we have spears, of course, to be able to rotate and block any cavalry that comes into the rear. So this right now is, I'm trying to model as close to my high formations as possible to show you the difference. Bolt throwers, as wide as they will go. I always like to go wide. I find it gets better saturation, and I like to number them at number 0 so they're down the back. Always use the scatter shot. Just leave it on scatter shot. It usually won't let you down. We're going to need to move forward rapidly because their crossbows have 160 range, ours only have 125, but we have armor piercing. What happens is Dark Elf players get overwhelmed and they don't let their range units get into range, and then their range units get swarmed from the front. There will be a point where we are going to move our entire formation except for the bolt throwers, which is why I don't really like artillery with the Dark Elves. You want to be maneuvering around, but there will be a point where we're going to hold Alt with the whole formation and move it up, and then we're going to engage, and this will be what closes the distance. So we're charging up into the enemy, tying up as many units in melee as we possibly can. Now, I'm going to show you here what happens if you get the pounce wrong. As you can see here, the enemy archers have engaged already, which means they didn't move forward, they didn't close the gap. And what you see here is what happens to many players. Now, our crossbowmen need to move in so much closer to close the range. And what happens if you have them all selected at once? They will walk on top of each other. As you can see, several crossbowmen are tied up in melee, some are shooting, but this will cause a lot more casualties. Why is that? Well, we've got some of our archers standing on top of each other. Some are shooting at one target, some are shooting at another. What we need to do is to keep them protected and focus fire those units down. Now, instead of this, let's show what you should be doing. We're going to do what I call pushing, pairing up, and then firing. We need to close that line. So what are the Dark Elves bad at? Well, they're bad at taking damage. Elves are a bit soft and weak, but unfortunately they are equipped with excellent armor and excellent weapons which more than make up for it. The problem is their low hit points mean if they get blobbed, they're going to take a lot of area of effect damage, so standing on top of each other is a sure way to play Elves very, very badly. This faction really is an iconic glass cannon. You want to be aggressive and moving. As you see here, we have replaced the bolt throwers with 2 skirmish cavalry. But remember, hold Alt and use them to cycle charge. You're using them for the terror and shock of the charge, not the damage, and if you target their archers, you will dominate. What you're seeing here now is, first of all, pushing the entire formation up, holding Alt and driving the whole formation forward. Next, pair up your melee units with their front line, one at a time, so you're getting a nice widespread front line that is evenly spaced. Then have your archers come up, close the gap right behind them, and start volleying at their archers. This should allow you to close the gap so you can fire and hit their archers and target their ranged units first, wipe them out, and then focus those armor-piercing bolts. Last thing I'll mention is the importance of heroes in your armies. They're very, very powerful. A single hero can swarm an entire unit around it, allowing those backs to be turned away from your archers and let those armor-piercing crossbow bolts rain in and absolutely ravage the enemy without any friendly fire risk to yourself. The Master is their best choice on the battlefield, highly skilled, well equipped. He can hop on a nightmare, but I honestly find he is best on foot defending those archers. Unless you're going for a more monster-based build, you might appreciate the mobility. Death Hags will provide some much needed replenishment, allowing you to expand quickly, but they're a bit on the squishy side, so Bride of Cain and just focus intensely on defensive. Assassins sit at the bottom of the list of your priorities, but getting them in your army just to get some levels on them, they're more useful for their abilities, increasing local slaves. The crown jewel hero, of course, is the Sorceress. Fantastic, flies on a Dark Pegasus, very nimble mount, excellent for a caster. Now to go through each of the lords and an army, focusing on their skills and abilities. This is about turn 28 with Malekith. Some people really don't like his campaign. It has gotten significantly easier because they keep on progressively making the slave system a lot more beneficial and easy. But if you've not played Malekith before, I have a guide. It's a little bit older, but the concepts remain the same. Start and move your way to the west. Take this peninsula. Peninsulas will slow down your slave degradation as well as give you access to the water. You need to stay near the water. The further you go from it, the more it favors them. The closer you are, the more it favors you. Work your way down to a perimeter and then sweep into the north past this initial hurdle. He has so much map dominating potential for 2 reasons. Diplomacy and discount on the basic units. We are mostly hovering around Dread Spears and Dark Shards. Just as a quick bonus tip, with Malekith, I've not focused on his magic at all. Why is that? Well, Malekith is our general. He can boost the effectiveness of every other unit in the army. Dark Shards are doing 90% of the work in here, besides magic. But if our Sorceress goes all the way down to magic and prioritizes that, fire is a good law of magic, then we don't need Malekith. They're sharing the same pool of magic. Let's keep Malekith focused on improving the army and improving the economy. Dreaded Slaver is a must for every lord, one of the first things you should get. But late game with Malekith, I like to get a Slaughter Lord. You gain an excellent discount on Blackguard. Remember, you can fast track your construction by sacrificing a few slaves, and then get your Blackguard at tier 4 with a reduced global upkeep, recruit them quicker, and at a very high rank. I wouldn't take these in all my armies, but with Malekith, he deserves the best. Another reason you will want lots of heroes is each of them gives you the chance to get the Overseer follower. This is possible after you get Broken by the Lash. So rush through this first line of research, go straight to Broken by the Lash. With the applicable heroes will give you a chance of rolling the Overseer follower. After that, hit and run and rework crossbows are essential to make your shades into killing machines. Whilst it's good to keep your captives, if you do choose to murder them, you gain the chance to gain the Slaver follower, giving you an extra 10 slaves per turn and increasing that capture rate. Now on the battlefield, Malekith, I've chosen a formation which will serve you quite well to the mid to late game. Relatively relatively affordable. Later on you can just trade all the dark shards out for shades, but this is also quite fun. So let's start off with what we do know. So I'm trying to evolve you from a high elf player into a dark elf player through these formations. So let's start off with what we already know. This time we're going to use a shielded dark shard. Now some people will straight away get rid of all their dark shards and replace them with shielded dark shards. Now you can do that, but here's the deal. The front row are screening, the rest of the guys are really unlikely to be hit, and you are creating a massive increase on your economy by paying for shields that aren't being used. So the idea is that you keep your cost where it will be used and recognize benefit. You can also throw an additional dark shard right here. And I don't mind that because that's quite cool, because the idea is we're trying to close in and unleash really nasty volleys early on. This is actually a staple. I didn't have it the last one because I was trying to grow from what we do know to something new. Having 1, 2, 3 and then changing them to shielded dark shards is something I recommend. First of all, we have a master as well as a sorceress. Because I want the formation to do the work in the battle, I'm not going to use any magic. Same for Malekith, and Malekith is going to be on a flank because he is on Seraphon, his black dragon. For some extra kick, I have a second black dragon. If you're newer at the game, just stick with Malekith, because lots of flying units can be really overwhelming. But in the very front line, we now have 2 Hydras, the signature beast. Now the point of the Hydras at the front is that they can regenerate. This is an extremely powerful ability in single player because you don't have life magic as the Dark Elves, but you do have War Hydras. They will take the damage in the battle and they can replenish all the way back up to full health, meaning you won't have to suffer losses on your units. You just take hit points off your War Hydra, and after the battle is finished, just let all the units rout, and while you're wiping them out, you'll heal back up to full health. Because Malekith buffs the Blackguard of Naggarond, you may as well use them in case they have a lot of heavy units, a lot of anti-large, where it might be in a siege. Honestly, Malekith and your castle will probably wreck 90% of the units anyway, but here we go. Let's kill some High Elves. Holding control, and because we have no artillery, we have this flexibility to move the whole formation up. So their High Elves, they have an excellent range on their archers. We need to make sure we pounce in time, and at this point it's a good chance to see what they have. They have a Phoenix. We should pair that Phoenix up with our Black Dragon, but we need to also be careful he doesn't get shot down by their archers, exposing himself in the process. Take note of hills. You don't want to be volleying over a hill, you want to be shooting down from one or avoiding the hill entirely. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to flank around with our dragons. Deselect the dragons and move the formation forward. Let's charge right up. We're going to let them have it now. So this is where you could drop some really meaty spells. Make sure you use your Dragon Breath side on. It's vitally important you hold spacebar and choose this as the times when you unleash your arrows. So 1 unit there, 1 unit here, and now we need to pair our units up with the enemy, making sure that none of their units get through. So Black Dragon's in a bit of trouble there. Let's change targets and roast those archers. Okay, that's 1 unit routed. No one's going to flank us. Let's bring our reserve infantry in to attack the enemy. Okay, our units are standing on top of each other. Not what we want. Let's change target. Okay, this is another great trick you can do. Now that this unit's tied up, we only need 1 unit to fight them. We push. We send units up and past. Break through their lines with your units. If you have flying units, fly them over the top. The idea is to disrupt their archers. If you can stop them using their archers, you will dominate the enemy with yours. So if you haven't caught wind of the current theme, running on top of your own units is really what will disable you from doing anything meaningful. Next up we have the fan favourite Lokhir Fellheart, the Admiral of the entire Dark Elf Navy, and this guy does it better than anyone else. So what does his faction do? It allows him to get Black Arks for every major port he has. Black Arks are powerful, get as many as you can. Every single faction needs to run Sacrifice to Mathlan as often as possible to get as many Black Arks. Put them in a dock somewhere and get that growth going. Once they're all built up, you will just sprawl across the entire map. He himself gets a 50% reduction to Blackheart Corsairs and even more improvements to them from there. Just remember, always get his quest items. Most importantly, Helm of the Kraken, which gives him regeneration. And on his personal line, of course, max out Sheathmaster, but his personal line is excellent, increasing his movement and improving Blackheart Corsairs, doubling their armor piercing capabilities and even more melee attack. Also giving them Vanguard deployment means they can close at that distance and also stalk, meaning they won't get sniped out by artillery. Between Master of the Blessed Dread and the unique building in his capital, he can also do 2 more bombardments for every single Black Ark nearby. If you want the source, get Charybdis as the beast that support this formation, but this is around turn 20 and is something that's quite easy to replicate. Some people go all out Black Ark Corsair spam, but I like to have a bit more dynamic than that. As you do level up, make sure you get Ravager rewards to get that extra distance on your Black Ark Corsair and more foot speed, but don't forget you have your unique rights as Lokhir. If expanding with an army that's not Lokhir, Sacrifice to Cain will allow you to group enemies around a single hero and detonate them, but for Lokhir himself, he gets an extra 20 armor for Charybdis, but most importantly, he can get a further 100% armor piercing for Black Ark Corsairs and even more improved campaign movement, allowing you to sack and raid with those Black Arks. And on the battlefield, let us continue to improve upon this transformation from a High Elf player to a Dark Elf player. We've of course started with the basics, but these are Black Ark Corsairs. They can skirmish, so if you really want, you can go all out Black Ark Corsairs and throw skirmish mode on them so they retreat, and against certain armies where the infantry are slower than yours, this will work great. However, if they have a lot of mobile units, maybe like wolves, this can often be an invitation to be scattered and then torn apart piece by piece. We're versing a very large undead army, although it's quite weak, we're not going to have a problem here, but at the same time, holding our formation so we can shoot is key. So we've got our basic 2 hollow diamonds. We have this center archer unit right here to give us a bit more bite when we get into range, because these guys have an even shorter range, but they can move. So to get even more aggressive, we're going to place another unit up here at the front. Now, normally I wouldn't do this with anything else but Shades and Black Ark Corsairs. Don't do this with regular archers, but even still, to protect the very front, we are going to place a spearman and a spearman, and then protecting the rear in reserve, we will place a regular Black Ark Corsair. I would only get the handbow version, but we start with one, and I don't have the heart to disband my basic units, so he can flank around once the enemy is engaged, and further in reserve we'll have this Manticore diving in to an engagement where we see fit. Now, behind this line, well, we can still use our good old-fashioned 3 archers at the back because they're longer range, can volley over the top, and this works. Having a short range at the front, they can support at the back, probably better than an entire unit of Black Ark Corsairs. Of course, at the front we want Lokhir Felhart, the man, tying them up, and because he is a great duelist, you want him hunting down the enemy lord. If possible, I see their lords there, so I will place him on this side. You know what, if I didn't want to demonstrate the formation, I would actually bunker down here and force them into a choke point. That's what I would do. You will take no casualties if you do that, but that's a really bad demonstration and not really going to show you anything new. However, we will close this gap just a bit. So let's move our Dread Spears around the flanks, protecting us, and our Manticore can also help to pin them down. This hill's denying a bit of line of sight, so let's move up a bit. Cool. So we don't want all of our Corsairs getting tied up. We only want a couple of them. So let's choose a couple of them, hold Alt to force them to charge into the masses. Let's blob these guys. So our archers at the back are out of range. Let's move the army up so they become in range. Now remember, focus fire. So against undead, the way you deal with undead is a little bit different. Focus fire on a unit till it's nearly dead and then leave it. So we're not getting flanked. We can bring our Dread Spears in. Now as for our flying unit, we're going to hold shift and then waypoint it. Don't forget to use your abilities on your lord. And this is why Black Ark Corsairs are so good. They've got some really, really good melee stats. They are not suffering at all. See when a unit's nearly dead? Change target. Don't try to kill those last couple of undead units. Let it crumble away. You're wasting your arrows. Okay, charge our Manticore into the back. We don't care if it rampages. There's no anti-large near there. We still don't want our units walking on top of each other, so let's move this unit up. The cool thing about Blackheart Corsairs is you can hold Alt, charge in, and do some nice damage on the charge. Just a quick reminder guys, if you are enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps out. Ask any question in the comments, I answer everything. And if you'd like to talk strategy, feel free to join the Discord. Cheers. Next up we have the Mother of Madness herself, Morathi, and her faction is primarily focused on spreading that Slaaneshi corruption. Morathi's faction has access to demonettes of Slaanesh. Whilst this isn't a huge game changer, it is absolutely fun replacing the cavalry arm of your army. There's many ways you can play Morathi, but she's less of a beat stick, although she can deal it back. You don't want her being the source of melee attention. Like all Dark Elf Lords, you need that dreaded slaver to get your economy going early on, and following the magic line will pay dividends once you get Pit of Shades and of course Greater Arcane Conduit. She has 2 magic lines and they're not quite as cut and dry as they were earlier. They've been changed very slightly. Insidious is very appealing because it increases your campaign movement of all armies. Very useful. Remember, that includes your Black Arks. Don't discount that. But she also buffs the signature unit of the entire race, which is Shades, and extra 10 melee defense. This is really good, guys. This alone is so hard to turn down. It's such a good unit. More Slaaneshi corruption. However, Tenacious does have a boost to post-battle loot and captives. Quite useful when you combine it with 30% upkeep. If you don't like Shades and want to go Monster or Hydra Heavy, you can take that, but my money's always there. Boost your Shades, and then put another point in Ravager rewards, boosting Shades even further. So let's get into this and take on Eltharion. So Shades, now our signature unit, we can do our typical formation with them, but which ones do we use? Well, currently there's 3 versions, and we have regular, dual weapons, and great weapons. The majority we have are regular, and that's not a bad move because they have the cheapest upkeep, so building yourself around them is not a bad idea. So up the front we will have the great weapons. Because we are versing High Elves, they may be scrawny, but they have excellent weapons, so they deal good damage, and their armor is very, very impressive. So we're going to do our typical trick of having 3 armored piercing units at the front. That unit, here we are. So we may as well go number 4, and you guys could be number 5. So if we need to quick swap, we easily can. We have Morathi on her Dark Pegasus, and flanking her, we have another mage, dealing fire damage, as well as a master, and an assassin on foot. So our heroes are going to catch the enemy on the front lines, and the armor piercing arrows of our Shades are going to absolutely ruin them. Let's hide our cavalry in the trees. Now finally, our demonette units, they kind of act as our cavalry. I like to keep them in reserve. They are a bit squishy, but they certainly are fun. Yes, it's a novelty, 100% it's a novelty. No lies about that. Oh, and then there's Eltharion's army. Back out, lads. We don't want to get surrounded, so we're going to back down again. So making sure we don't get completely surrounded. And because I'm playing with Morathi, I'm going to use magic. Okay, so let's use this as a choke point and set our army up. So if they don't want to play ball, just keep on harassing them with Morathi. So they can't see our Shades. So this is our trap to spring. If their archers engage, you can cast your vortex spells or area of effect spells, and they won't have time to lower their weapons, and you can do some good damage, but you're often better off saving your winds of magic for when they are engaged in melee. Just make sure you keep these units on the front line moving, back and forth, and avoiding the enemy fire. We want to force them to have no choice but to come in and engage. You can even select 2 units at once, going back and forth, but once they are moving, try to keep them going roughly in the same direction. Oof, okay. They're forcing us to return fire now. Using our hero to pin the enemy cavalry in place. Okay, see this? All our archers are walking on top of each other. Not a good thing. This is where Pit of Shades will really come in handy. All the enemy are clumped up here, and we can do some really nice armor piercing damage on the enemy. Alright, now shoot into the flanks where they're exposed. And sending our demons up to engage. Now you only need one unit engaged at a time. Using your flying units to harass their units can be a really, really useful thing. And of course, always targeting their archers before anything else. And notice that we keep pushing the enemy archers away with our exalted demonettes, stopping them from closing the gap with us. Once the enemy's shattered, move on to the next target and definitely take down those really tough heroes and characters so you don't have to deal with them later. Next up, Crone Hellebron. Her strength is all around those Witch Elves, Sisters of Slaughter, just full on aggression with light, hard-hitting infantry, probably the most glass cannon out of a glass cannon themed race. As usual, start in Dreaded Slaver and then invest in Sheathmaster to power up your archers, because you still need archers. After this you can go in a number of ways. If you're playing on the harder difficulties, consider investing in Sisters of Slaughter to give them an extra 6 melee defense. It'll help them hold the line. Even just this first point down her melee line is absolutely worth it, and after that, of course, you know the drill, improve your melee defense and improve hit points, because goddamn it is awful. Although Heroic Killing Blow, very useful. Once you have her on a Manticore, she can dive in and really assassinate a single enemy hero or character. Sisters of Slaughter as well as Hargoneth Executioners are her key units. Her unique line mostly focuses on bolstering Witch Elves as well as Hargoneth Executioners, allowing you to field units that aren't that appealing normally, but are very, very high performing in her army. I love the way they build the game like this. Rushing this line and getting regeneration drastically improves her survivability. Bolstering her Witch's Brew ability is always a nice to have, and get as many buffs as you can because that armor is god awful. Choose between the Cauldron of Blood or the Manticore, they're both good options. Now on the battlefield with Crone, we're going to start off with the most defensive elements first because they're the easiest to understand. Let's move up something you've seen in the previous formations. We have 2 hollow diamonds, and up the front and on the corners we're using her buffed up Hargoneth Executioners. They are an anti-infantry style melee infantry, but they have 100 armor. They're really well equipped and well disciplined. You don't want to make an army out of them, but they act as a defensive infantry in this force. Now we also have all shielded dark shards. This is a backup in case the core of your offense can't deal with anything. You might be in a siege, you might just have some big nasty targets, or if they just have a lot of ranged units in general, you can then proceed with this armored core here and protect your more fragile units. Immediately behind them we're going to put Witch Elves. They have their unique daggers which will pin the enemy in place by enraging them, but if we're going full aggressive we're going to place them here, and this will just send the enemy crazy and make them easy pickings for our archers. Now, in as first rank of reserves, Sisters of Slaughter, and then behind them, of course, one more unit of Sisters of Slaughter, and they're going to start off in this formation, and as the battle proceeds, they will come out in the flanks and envelop and hit the enemy thanks to their excellent foot speed and charge bonus. Using a Death Hag up the front for similar reasons, and let's begin the battle. Moving up, we have the range advantage, another reason to always bring at least some range units, and if this was against a range heavy army, these shields with our dark shards would buy us some time and allow us to take their range units out, so it's not just us eating a bunch of arrows. Now let's charge in with our melee units. Alright, sending those Hargoneth Executioners into those trolls. They're a heavy unit and we don't want to get enveloped by them. Now we're flanking with our Sisters of Slaughter on that flank. Check your archers and focus down strong enemies, one at a time. Getting those meaty charges in with the Sisters of Slaughter, and then run them around the back to get a second charge, to completely envelop the enemy. The Witch Elves pinning the enemy in place. Of course, Crone enraging the enemy so they can't get away, making them easy pickings for our archers. Your Sisters of Slaughter also excellent at routing the enemy, and once they've routed one unit, send them into another. Don't waste too much time, get another charge and ruin their leadership. Next up we have Malus Edgelord Darkblade. This campaign shows an excellent example of a admiral escorting a legendary lord. We have Malus Darkblade with a relatively cheap army for this stage in the game. However, Malus is such a beatstick, in melee, at any point we can always just go full possession. Once leveled up suitably, Malus Darkblade can take on entire armies at once as long as he has access to Zarkhan, but you should alternate between this and his at peace state because they offer different benefits to your empire. Rank up an army as normal, just like you would any other lord with Malus. He doesn't start off as one-man doom stack, contrary to popular belief, but once you have enough levels on him, if you need to separate him out, he can be very useful. Use this gimmick, just don't rely on it. Improve your captives and your archers for those early battles. Later on in the campaign, way later, you can get Night Lord if you want to use Cold One Riders. They're not really a great unit, but come on, Spite's a cold one. You gotta have some fun. I like using the Source. I'd rather use a fun and thematic army rather than one that's completely min-maxed, and it's gonna be almost as effective. But you don't want too many. You'll see, you only need a couple. They are 50% reduced upkeep, making them quite an economical beatstick for charging in. He has 2 skill trees. They're not mutually exclusive. One is for when he's in his basic human form, the other when he's transformed into Zarkhan. It gives you cooldown on these abilities that you need to use to keep him alive. Watch his animations. Once he dives into the enemy, piled around them, then use these. Plus 30% casualty replenishment, very, very important. You do want all of these in time. Having Stalk will keep him safe, and then just go down maximizing melee defense, healing, hit points. If you don't have full possession, roll on Spite. If you do have full possession, roll on Foot. It makes him a smaller target. Now on the battlefield for Malus Darkblade, we're starting off with obviously 2 hollow boxes, because if it ain't broke, why fix it? And we're also going to add in our back row, as well as one last lot of archers in the middle. And our archers here are shades with great weapons, of course gaining that extra armor piercing and anti-infantry, making them pretty decent at almost anything. This is a really common late game setup, so we've got 12 out of our possible 20 units here are shades, and honestly you can go even heavier if you do need. And the way Black Arks work, you will have some very heavy shade armies once money becomes no problem, but we want to have a bit of variety and we want the Source. So the Malus Darkblade, it is a unit I have horrendously and endlessly mocked on, which is the Cold One Dread Knights, which are significantly better in Warhammer 3. Still not a brilliant unit by any stretch of the imagination, but the buffs that Malus gives him in single player is enough to make me want to bring them. Plus Raptors are cool, nothing is changing that. Let's put a Malus Darkblade with an honor guard of Dread Knights, and on the flanks we'll actually keep our heroes, allowing our Hydras to breathe some fire and then run straight into the enemy. Finally up ahead, our Sorceress dealing damage on the battlefield. Let's begin the battle, and as always holding Alt and left click to position your formation. So when you see the enemies getting too close, grab your formation and see that this is only a couple steps away, and this will get us to a position where we can start shooting. Hydra 1, select the enemy to breathe fire, as well as Hydra 2, and this is a nice way to greet the enemy. Spells like Chill Wind will slow the enemy down, allowing you to make the most use of your archers. Now there's a few ways you can do this, even sitting the archers still, keeping in mind that shades do have better range, and at this stage in the campaign you will get to have a huge increase in this range thanks to all of the technologies you can get. Now you can transform into Zarkhan as Malus, and this will give you other options. Using Zarkhan does take a bit more skill than you would think. You'd think you want to use all his abilities straight away. You do want to keep increasing his health, but when he dives in like that, that is when you use Bloodstorm to blast the enemy to pieces. But don't just, not a small group like that, wait for even more units to be pinned down like that. When the enemy get too close, focus fire, then change target. So when fighting Skaven, you can get overwhelmed quite quickly. Just break a unit, then move on. Break the next unit, move on. Then once you've got enough space, keep firing on them until they shatter, so you don't need to break them again. If your units walk on top of each other, march one of them forward, and there you go. Now this is where the buffs in single player will make these Cold One Knights a lot better, increasing their charge bonus, which is a little bit underwhelming for a cavalry unit like this. The sheer damage of these armor-piercing arrows is the reason why this is such a great unit, but they can hold their own in melee reasonably well. I mean, they're not going to outduel really big things. They're not going to beat up Black Orcs anytime soon, but that's not the point. They just need to hold the enemy in place, so when they tie up one unit, they only tie up one, and they don't tie up the entire formation. Finally, we have Rakarth the Beast Tamer. Just a quick overview of his faction. In case you don't remember, his main mechanic is the Beast Pen. So he gains this through victories, but also can gain it from raiding stance. Do not overlook this ability where he doesn't get the penalty for raiding stance. You absolutely should, whenever possible, be moving in raiding stance to acquire new monsters into the pool. Keep in mind where you are in the world will determine what you get, and his starting position in Lustria means those juicy dinosaurs are only one lucky roll away, and those dinosaurs, when you raise them, are 10% cheaper. So Rakarth, unlike most legendary lords, doesn't just make himself play unique, he makes the whole faction play unique. So you'll enjoy a sprinkling of dinosaurs. These are a great get out of jail free card, similar to Regiments of Renown. Whilst you will have many beasts in your army, don't forget you are still a Dark Elf Slave Lord, Dreaded Slaver, that economy still needs to roll, and 3 points in Sheaf Master. Don't even think twice about it. Attempting to gain beasts through raiding or combat gets even more reward with his first ability. He gains free harpies. Cool, I guess they're free, so that's good fodder. You can heal in foreign territory, and if you find yourself hiring monsters for Rakarth, make sure they are the Charybdis, gaining that amazing Charybdis breath. So similar to Hydras with fire, they breathe ice instead. Harpy Claw bolts slow the enemy, improve your captives, as well as increase your monster trapping chances, so feel free to rush that. And depending on your preference, you could miss or get pack hunters and apex predators. Absolutely dominant. He's quite a flexible lord that you can use to make pretty fun armies with because of his large beastry options, and with our shielded units in the front because they're going to get hit by missiles the most. Charybdis at the front gaining their extra icy breath when Rakarth is in charge. Very nice. And I'm going to experiment here and show you what you can do with bolt throws. Some people really like having bolt throws, and whilst they don't keep up with your army, they do give you some good options in sieges, and they will allow you to trade with enemy artillery. Just always have them on the multi-shot round. In most cases they tend to be best whilst doing so, and in this fight the enemy does have some artillery, so I'll show you how you deal with that, because that can really hurt you in the early game, and your squishy elven hit points will not thank you for being shot at. Let's protect our flanks with a dinosaur on each side to really demotivate them from hitting us, and on the flanks we also want our black dragon. That's right, we're going to have a couple of flyers including Brachus, which is Rakarth's mount, on the flanks. So we need to move up and close the gap as quickly as possible. Those Bretonian catapults have excellent range, they are really punishing. Target their artillery with our own, and this should encourage them to attack us. With your dragons, 3 clicks in each direction to avoid the fire while your army closes the gap. We're getting right up there. Send your units right up into their grill, and when they get close, that's where we pair them, okay? Holding spacebar, making the right time, the right choice. Okay, now is when we drill our enemies in. Cool. Okay, range units are in range of the archers. This is where we go in. Range units in range of the archers. Let's send our dragons down. Let's send in Rakarth to stop this unit from getting pinned down. Very good. Awesome. Focus fire them down so only we have the range superiority. Looks like their cav are tied up. I'm going to send one of these carnosaurs up and leave the other one here to babysit those catapults. Getting shot at. Cool. Alright, let's focus down these infantry blobs, and then we can run our archers freely up the field, allowing them their own choice of target. Really powerful technique is when the enemy is routing, just keep on pushing them back. So while this unit is being chased by a monster, they're actually chased by anything. They're not going to be able to turn around. So by sending a single unit with guard mode off after maybe a ranged unit or a really powerful unit you don't want to regroup, this will push them out of the battle and stop them ever harming you again. Cool. When you have a moment, let's reform, holding control to tilt our archers back. Rakarth's unique whiplash ability will prevent him from losing control of his monsters. Just a tip when using dragons, you want to be as far away as possible to get a nice long shot down the length. and that will give you the most area of effect. Wasn't paying attention, so that's cavalry is hitting us, and this shows what? This is actually a really great example. This is why we'd use our boxes and keep ourselves separated. He only tied up a single unit there. He didn't tie up all three because we had that separation. And that's our final battle, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. Hopefully this has given a bit of guidance on how to make a more aggressive faction like the Dark Elves work for you. They not just sit back and shoot like many other armies. Although late game you can with shades, it's not very imaginative, but it's also quite expensive doing that. You can have a lot of fun with dynamic armies like this, or if you want to doomstack, you can. Hopefully this has given you some guidance and some inspiration to play the game you want, and hopefully have a little bit of an easier time. Check out the other formation guides. If you have enjoyed, please like, share, sub. This is Elvin. I'll see you next time.